okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so let's see. It's 3 minutes of, so we can still chat just like we are, but I am going to go live. Okay,
All
so
right. Sounds good.
let's get this started, and we are good. So people start popping on, hopefully real soon. Yeah, I was really happy that number one, that you would do this for us. I really appreciate it. It's timely, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Crazy. And there was a lot of good response to it tonight. So uh
Yeah.
seeing people are joining. So welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a few minutes and we'll go from there. So yeah, so I'll be back in touch so that think about what you guys would want to talk about, and we'll get that all squared away coming up
Yeah.
real soon.
Sure.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Same place, right? It's going to be at the same place.
Absolutely same place. Yep. Yep. January 30th and 31st are the dates. So it's right, same, pretty much same time, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Great.
Yeah. So it should be good. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah. Yeah. I always get such a good turnout there too.
Yeah. So super excited.
Excellent.
Hey, Mark, did you happen to participate in the call that New Jersey DEP had regarding the neonics? And were you part of that too?
Yes, yeah, I did. And it was, rather informative, but I think there's a whole lot left to hash out is what I got out of that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I communicated with John afterwards and actually posted. I don't know if you probably get my emails from NJNLA, right? I hope you do.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Communicated, kind of gave a little bit of the Q&A that he had taken. So I got a copy of that. And then of course, just this whole exemption stuff and what has to be figured out. So
Yeah. Yeah, John's great, and it sounds like he's just been put in kind of a tough spot as the way the law was written is tricky to then do his end of it. So it's a tough spot for him, and I don't envy him. That's for sure.
yeah, he's got a heavy lift, and apparently he came out of retirement to do this.
He sure did. He
Foolish.
sure did.
For those that
Yeah.
are joining us, we're just talking about New Jersey DEP actually had a webinar, 2 weeks ago, maybe,
Yeah.
just to talk about life after neonics and what that looked like for people in New Jersey. So I'm sure you'll probably touch on it a little bit tonight, but
Oh yeah.
obviously if there's any questions, we can take them. So, and I see Wendy put something in the chat. So hi, Wendy. We're looking forward to talking to you about neonics tonight too. So it'll be a
Yeah.
good conversation for sure. So let's see. All right, 7:01. So we can get started. Just, people will pop on as they pop on. It is recorded, so if they missed the beginning, they can get it on the other end. So anyhow, beautiful night tonight, right? A little chilly, but here we are. We get to be in the nice warmth of our homes doing a webinar. Anyhow, welcome Backyard Forestry in 90 Minutes online. My name is Lori Jensen. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Forestry Association. We're super happy that you're here tonight. Have a great program. And as you know, we do this every third Thursday of the month. So hopefully you can come back every month. So real quick, feel free to stop by in the chat to say hello and and then if you have any questions for our presenter, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. When you think of them, just pop them right in there. And Mark is going to stop kind of throughout the presentation. We'll kind of take a look at what questions are in there. So let's keep this interactive and let's get going. So I'm just the usual couple slides. I already mentioned we do this every third Thursday of the month. So hopefully you get our emails and you can hear about next month's topic and so on and so forth. And then another thing, this is new, we actually will be opening registration for this tomorrow. So we are doing a walk in the woods again. We did them earlier in this year and it was super successful. So we're doing it again. There will be 2 walks on Friday, November 3rd. There will be 1 walk on Saturday, November 4th. If you get my emails, you'll hear all about it that way. And it'll also be popped on our website. So we look forward to maybe seeing you in the woods. And then, of course, if you're not a member of the association, we really hope that you would consider joining us. Or if you haven't renewed this year, there's still time for sure. And this is just some of the benefits of what we provide. We have some great e-newsletters. We have information on the website. If you haven't been to the website lately, maybe go over there and take a look. We have a great resource section now that's updated, and there's some good information there. We're already planning the 2024 annual meeting. We were back in person earlier this year. Woodland Stewards program just took place. It was fantastic to have a full registration for the Woodland Stewards program. Mark, just so you know, this is a program we do. It's 3.5 days of really immersive forestry for people. And we go up to a camp in Sussex County, Camp Linwood McDonald. We have a whole bunch of speakers that come in. They stay at the camp. We eat meals together. It's incredible. So I think we actually ended up with a waiting list. So we will be doing that again next fall. And I'll let you know when that gets opened and all that stuff. So, and of course, we represent you, the landowner, in many ways. Anybody that's likes forestry, is interested in forestry, we would appreciate your membership. So moving right along, if you've missed past backyard forestries or you have to leave early tonight, we do post them on YouTube. So just follow us, New Jersey Forestry Association, and you'll see a lot of great programs on there. So now it's time for me to be quiet and for Mark to take over. So Mark, I am super excited to have you here tonight. We've known each other for quite a few years. He's with Rainbow Ecoscience, and I'm just appreciative of you being willing to share your knowledge again tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, give me 1 minute here. I'll get set up. And can you see my screen?
Yep. Looking good. Looking good.
All right. Let me just pull up my view here. Let me test it. Okay, perfect. All set. So yeah, as Lori mentioned, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to come out. I'm a giant tree nerd, and I love talking about trees. So anytime I have an audience, especially a captive one, it excites me because you're kind of stuck here to hear me go on and on and on. So happy to be here, happy for the opportunity, and looking forward to our subject tonight. So some of you, I know Wendy already commented that she's excited to learn about what even neonics are. And it's a big, scary word, but we're going to kind of unpack what they are and go through a whole lot. I will start with a disclaimer that sometimes I get a little carried away. So if there's any point where you have questions throughout the presentation, or there's a word that I use that you're unfamiliar with, or are like, what in the world does that mean? Feel free to throw it in the Q&A box or the comments box or the chat box, and I'll pause here and there to just make sure that everybody's still with me. One of the downsides of webinars is I don't get to see if I'm putting people to sleep, if people are really excited. So feel free to put little chats in there, ask questions, and interact as much as we can here together. To introduce myself a little bit more, my name is Mark Ware. I'm an arborologist, and I work for Rainbow Ecoscience, and I'll talk about Rainbow a little bit. And if you've never heard of an arborologist, it's because there's a really good reason for that, and that is it's more of an internal term. Probably the only one you'll ever meet, which is kind of cool. But it's kind of a made up term, so to speak, and it encompasses an awful lot. So I do things like research, training and education, all kinds of different things. There's a lot of facets to my job, and so that word kind of summarizes all of it, which is kind of exciting. But I'm a board certified master arborist. I live in the South Jersey region now. If any of you are from Gloucester County, I'm right there in Pittman. So if you ever have any questions or have any cool trees you want to show me in the area, all for it. And then what Rainbow is, Rainbow Ecoscience, what we do at Rainbow is we are a manufacturer and researcher and supplier of plant healthcare equipment. And what I mean by that is different active ingredients like pesticides. We will bring them from the agriculture side and try and see if we can use them for our side, our ornamental trees. If they fit, we'll figure out when to use them, how to use them, what rates to use them, all that sort of thing. So we're kind of bringing active ingredients from one side, from one industry, into our industry. And that's where we've gotten a lot of our products from. We also manufacture our own equipment in order to deliver these products. And also we have well over, gosh, I don't even know the number now, hundreds of protocols that we've developed for different pest and disease issues within the landscape. So this is a really relevant topic for us, and one that we are ingrained in. So once again, as a disclaimer, if I ever get ahead of myself here and use words that you don't understand, please chime in. So this is a little bit what we're going to cover today. We are going to go through what are neonics, so just defining the word. What are these products that some people are really fired up and angry about their use? Some people aren't. It's kind of this polarizing buzzword it's turned into. You may have heard it in the news or different publications, read about it. We're going to talk about why it has turned into this buzzword and kind of really get into the weeds a little bit of what exactly they are. We're going to talk about why they're under all this scrutiny and why there's legislation in place that even addresses them. We're going to talk about alternate products and methods that we can use because neonics, as we're going to see, are a really important tool in the use and in the management of a lot of our invasive and damaging pests. And so they're a really important tool. So we're going to talk about some other tools that we can use while these ones we're losing in New Jersey. And then we're going to look at a couple of examples of how to use these non-neonic products and methods in some of the more common protocols. So, hold on. I have to click my mouse here every time. So the legislation that we're talking about, so as of October 31st, the use of neonicotinoid products, and we'll talk about which ones those are no longer going to be available or allowed to be used in the state of New Jersey for ornamental trees and shrubs, as well as for lawns, and I think maybe a couple other things. But definitely trees and shrubs, we are no longer allowed to use neonicotinoid products in the ornamental landscape. They can still be used in agriculture and some of the other industries, but they will no longer be allowed for us directly. Now, we're not the first ones to introduce legislation, and we certainly won't be the last ones either. As you can see here, there's been a number of states that have considered legislation against neonic use, and there have also been states that have actually enacted legislation limiting or restricting the use of neonics. For example, Maine is quite restrictive. New York and Rhode Island. New York just, I think they just passed, or they are passing, the Birds and Bees Protection Act, which also a big part of that is the banning of neonics for pretty much everything, with a few exceptions in the state as well. So it's nothing that's new. It's nothing that's really surprising. However, it is something that's quite impactful to our industry as a whole here. So we're going to talk about that. Now, before we jump into it, we need to talk about a term I'm going to be using quite a bit tonight, and that is systemic movement. So neonicotinoid products, most of these products are systemic. And what I mean by systemic are these are products that most of the time when we think about pesticide use, especially insecticide use, we're thinking of it being sprayed in the air, sprayed on a tree, sprayed on a bug, sprayed on the baseboards of your house, right? It's sprayed. Well, with systemic products, we're able to deliver them via soil injection, which you can see is this top picture. There's a soil, let me see if I can get my laser pointer. There we go. You can see she has a backpack hooked up to a soil probe, and she's injecting a product right into the ground. We can deliver some products via just a bark spray. So you're just spraying the bark. The molecules are so small that they're absorbed into the tree and taken up through the tree that way. And then sometimes we can do things where we're actually, think of it almost as like intravenously delivering products. So we're drilling holes into the tree and delivering products directly into the tree, which is really exciting. So these products are taken up via the roots, taken up into the tree. They're taken up the roots, bark, or through the soil, and then distributed through the tree that way. And the nice thing about systemic movement is that we no longer have to use gallons of material and spray an entire tree, we can deliver much smaller volumes of material more directly and still get the same, if not usually better, results. And so that's really quite an exciting change in the technology. And these things, I say change in technology, but really these products have been around for decades at this point. But the reason you don't see many people out there spraying anymore is because we have these really effective products that we can use in much lower volumes, and apply them in ways that really reduce the exposure to the environment, right? There's way less drift concerns, which is if you're spraying in the air and the wind blows. We don't have those concerns anymore with these types of systemic products because we're applying them such low doses. So it's really exciting. And now let's talk about what actually are these neonicotinoids. What is this $5 word that I hear all the time? Well, neonicotinoids are a class of insecticides that move systemically within plants. And they are extremely effective at controlling some of our most problematic families of pests. Now, I'm not saying that every insect within the Coleoptera and Hemiptera and Hemoptera families are pests. These families encompass thousands of species of insects. However, there are certain ones in these families that are classified as pests, right? Meaning that they are having a negative effect on something, right? Some pests, we call them pests because they're annoying, right? Mosquitoes are really annoying. They're a pest. Some pests can be damaging to trees, or some insects can be damaging to trees. That's why we would define them as a pest, right? So it's important to make that consideration. But the nutshell here is that these products are extremely effective at controlling a lot of these really problematic pests. And they are now one of the most commonly used insecticide groups in agriculture and within landscape and ornamental plants. So their use is widespread. And you'll see why that is as we go through it. You'll start to understand, like, oh, okay, I see why these are used so often. Now, neonicotinoids, I'm going to refer to them as neonics just for the sake of myself, really. But neonics are similar to the naturally occurring insecticide nicotine. The term neonicotinoid translates to new nicotine-like insecticide. And the way these things work is they selectively bind and interact with these receptors within the nervous system, ultimately leading to paralysis, right? And if you're paralyzed and you can't move your mouth parts anymore, you're eventually going to die. So that's how these things work in a nutshell. A little morbid there for a Thursday night, but that's how these insecticides work. And we'll talk about some other insecticides and how they work. And it's kind of fascinating and also sort of morbid, but really quite interesting how these things go about controlling pests. Now, one of the reasons that neonics gained in popularity so rapidly ever since they were introduced is that because prior to their introduction, the primarily used family of insecticides were organophosphates. Organophosphates posed quite a significant risk to both mammals and birds. They also had systemic movement, some of them did, but they were really harmful and really risky products to use. And so when neonicotinoids came about, these were products that had the same, if not better, effectiveness. However, they were much lower, much less risk to mammals and birds, which was a great thing. So it was like kill two birds with one stone. Probably not a great analogy there, but you see what I'm saying there, right? So now we have products that are working better and have much less of a risk of affecting our mammals and bird population. How does it get better than that, right? And these things have been considered what we call reduced risk, especially when applied as a soil application or a trunk injection, or even as a lower systemic bark spray, which are those three applications we saw a couple slides ago. The other thing that's important is that they have to be applied via the label. They have to be applied the way the label tells you to, right? Sounds pretty simple and straightforward, but as you'll see, It's not always the case, unfortunately. So which neonicotinoids are we losing? Which are the ones that we've used in the landscape primarily? It's these 5 active ingredients, and they are imidacloprid, dimeteffuran, acetamiprid, clethianidin, and thiamethoxam. Um, yeah, it's taken me a long time to get the pronunciations of them down, but I'm glad I finally have. But these are the 5 that are most actively used. Above all, imidacloprid is the most common one. That's a product that you were able to go to like Home Depot and Lowe's, these big box stores, and you could get that product right on the shelf, right? It was right off the shelf. But if you look at those active ingredients that are listed in it, and we'll look at those and where to find them, you'll see imidacloprid was an active ingredient that was in a lot of them. So this is one that was commonly used, and it actually also had it was really available, readily available to homeowners, professionals, just anybody who wanted to get it. It was easy to get, and it was quite cheap. And so these were the big ones that we are losing. These will no longer be available for us, and we'll talk about the impacts there, right? And you may have used these in the past on your own trees, right? So pests like emerald ash borer or hemlock woolly adelgid, Japanese beetles there in the top right picture, and then of course everybody's favorite, the spotted lanternfly. These products were some of the best, most effective at controlling a lot of these pests. And this is just 4 examples of dozens and dozens and dozens that these products did the best job of controlling, right? And so it's important to keep that in mind as we move forward here, that some of you may think that losing neonics is a good thing. And there certainly needed to be regulations enacted. I don't want to make it sound like I'm against any kind of regulation at all. However, thoughtful regulation is always better than just blanket regulation. So just my own little 5 cents there. So now, why are they under scrutiny, right? So we talked about, what they've been used for, what they are. Why are they under scrutiny? Why all of this hubbub over this group of products? Well, there have been several unfortunate high-profile cases of mass pollinator kills, with the first one and largest one being in 2013 out in Oregon, where, depending on the article you read, anywhere between 50,000 and 200,000 bumblebees were killed after an application of a pesticide that contained dimeteffuran. This was a product called Safari. It was done in a Target parking lot. It was also done, ironically, during National Pollinator Week. And because of where it was done and how it was done, it was, a high-profile area, right? Target's a pretty popular store. And so this got a lot of news press. And to this day, if you read the label on any product that contains dimeteffuran or imidacloprid, it explicitly tells you on the label that you are not allowed to apply it to linden trees. This is why, because of this right here. So I say that because it's important to note that these products can have a devastating impact on pollinators, and pollinators are really, really good. They do a lot of really important jobs for us. And without them, well, we'd be really hungry, for one thing, and have a lot less pretty flowers to look at for sure. So pollinators are important, right? And so exposure of bees to neonicotinoids, it's not a good thing, right? We don't want these bees or pollinators, right, to be exposed to these products because it can have harmful side effects to them. Now, keep in mind that this was a misapplication. And when I say misapplication, that means it was an application that was done off label, not according to the label. So we have 2 things at play here. We have a product that can be devastating to bees and pollinators, and we have a product that was being applied not according to label, right? And so that's important, that off label. So there's no doubt that neonicotinoid use and negatively impact pollinators. However, and this is from the, and I always struggle with this word still, but I guess this is the Xerxes Society, which if you want to know anything about anything when it comes to bees and pollinators, this is the place to go. So I encourage you, if you're interested, read more on that. The Xerxes Society, Xerces. Now there are still some knowledge gaps as well. I want to be, fully give the whole story here. That's what I like to do, is tell the whole story. So there are still some knowledge gaps as far as to how toxic and how much exposure is too much exposure. And so there is still some things that are needed to be learned. But this is why neonicotinoids under scrutiny. Okay, and so the other thing to keep in mind here is that arborists, landscapers are the small users when compared to agriculture and even homeowner use, right? Because once again, these products were so easy to get, and they might even still be easy to get until the end of the month. But after the end of the month, forget about it. You won't be seeing them. But these, so as arborists and landscapers, we were the small users, which is unfortunate because we're the ones that are the most affected by it. But that's something to keep in mind. So there are a few things that we can do. Now, in this case, I'm talking in a much broader term because there are other insecticides and pesticides that are being used out there that also can have downsides, right? Because we're talking about pesticides, which is literally means we are killing something, right? To be completely blunt, right? That's what we're doing. That's what these products do, right? Now, most of the time, the good effects of that outweigh significantly the bad effects. And so when we are using products, regardless of what they are, whether they're neonics or just wasp and hornet spray, we have to be using them in responsible ways across the board. That's what's going to keep these products available to us. And so we want to avoid treating plants that attract pollinators, right? And that's across the board. That's even with the alternative products we're going to talk about later on tonight. If these plants are attractive to pollinators, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to preserve those populations, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We also want to avoid treating plants that are close to plants that attract pollinators, because once again, if we're doing a spray treatment, well, drift is a concern, right? And if we have we're treating one tree that maybe isn't a big deal for pollinators or maybe isn't in bloom, that product can drift and move to plants that maybe are. We want to avoid preventative treatments when pests are below action thresholds. Now, what action thresholds are these, this is a threshold that's reached. So essentially, if you have a population of a pest, you could have a small population that doesn't need action. However, once it gets to a certain threshold, whether it's a damaging threshold or an annoying threshold or whatever that threshold is, now we have action that we need to take, right? And so if we have a pest and we just see one or two of them, not a big deal. We don't need to go and throw the whole kitchen sink at it. But if we have hundreds or thousands of them, now they're above an actionable threshold. Now we can take action. And so that's an important concept, which unfortunately we don't have time to get into all of this stuff. I'd love to, but we just don't have the time for it. But above all else here, following label directions. I mean, it's really important. And I know, especially guys, we get that IKEA furniture, and the last thing we want to do is read the directions because we can figure this out ourselves, right? It's just in our blood, it's in our nature. When it comes to pesticides, when it comes to anything with a label, follow those label directions, read through that label, understand what it is you're using, how to protect yourself, and how to protect the environment. It's really important. Plus, you're going to get the best results from it too, because more isn't always better. So just making sure that is critical to your safety, pollinator safety, and the effective use of these products, which sometimes can be quite expensive as well. So also helping out, economically even. So following label directions, I'm going to say it 1,000 times because it's so important. And we're going to look at some of the important aspects of a label as well here. But following label directions is so critical. And then we're going to follow IPM principles. And if you don't know what IPM is, bear with me because we're going to go through it because it is incredibly important. And it's a management protocol, we'll call it, that is critical. And so if you don't know what IPM is, like I said, we're going to go through it. I'm going to keep you in suspense for now, though, but not for long. Now, I like to think of this, I like to look at things positively and optimistically. And, I look at this as an opportunity to kind of not only get back to basics and focus on non-chemical aspects of pest management, but also to look at other chemical aspects of pest management, right? Because like I said, because neonics are so incredibly effective and have all these really good aspects to them, as well as some possibly negative ones, they became one of the primary tools in a lot of especially professional arborists and landscapers toolbox for managing pests, which means that a lot of the other tools that we have, other products, kind of got left in the dust. And it's not because they weren't good products, but it's because these products were incredibly easy to use and incredibly effective, right? So it's an opportunity for us to maybe look at and kind of revisit some of these other products that we have available and other methods of control that we have available. So I'm going to try and put a positive spin on this, yeah, because it is unfortunate, it really is. But I like to stay optimistic. So as promised, when I talked about IPM here, and I'm going to pause for a second because Clark had a great question. And he put in here, what plants don't attract pollinators? Now, most plants are going to be visited by pollinators. However, there are a lot of plants, especially trees, that are wind pollinated, meaning that instead of a bumblebee showing up and hanging out in the flower for a bit and then moving on and moving that pollen to other plants or other species of that same plant, these produce pollen that's blown from one plant to another plant. So you have what's called wind pollinated plants. So once again, they can still be, they'll still be visited by pollinators, Clark, but they may not necessarily be primarily pollinated by them. And I'm not an expert on American chestnut, but I do believe you are correct that that is an example of a wind pollinated plant. Another question from Joanne was, do I know what Mosquito Joe uses because they treat during the day? And no, I don't. And that's not a rabbit hole that I'm prepared to go down either. I don't know the ins and outs of that business at all, or what they use. So I'm going to leave that lie where it's at. But that's something to maybe if you have them as a service, I think it's a fair question to ask, or a similar service. I think those are really important to know what's happening on your property. And then Susan asked, are these used systemically for ash treatments? Now, the main product that we use for ash tree treatments is actually not a neonicotinoid, thankfully, because we got to save those ash trees. And we have to do that systemically. So ash trees are affected by a pest called emerald ash borer. Now, and then they're affected by other ones, but that's the big deal one right now that's killing ash trees. So when you're going down the turnpike, you can tell the ash trees because those are the trees that are completely dead. I call them 70-mile-an-hour trees. If you're on the New Jersey Turnpike, they're the 80-mile-an-hour trees. But those are so fortunately that pest, we're able to control that systemically with a systemic product. But the main product used for that, which we're going to actually talk about, believe it or not, is fortunately for us not affected by this legislation. It is not a neonicotinoid. So great question, great comments there. Keep them coming here.
Hey, Mark, just a question for you,
Sure.
because now I forget who it was. Joanne said about Mosquito Joe, not to talk about him, but she said they treat during the day. So just to address that, like most applications or whatever are done during the day, right? There's
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just
Yeah.
wanted to just mention that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very seldom will you see anything applied at night. In fact, yeah, most products, regardless of what they are, will be applied during the day. Now, sometimes what we will do, Joanne, to kind of help mitigate any potential risk is we'll apply early in the morning or sometimes later in the evening when bees and pollinators aren't necessarily as active. And so that's one way that we can kind of help mitigate the effects of what we're doing. So there's still ways to apply during the day and also be respectable or be ethical, I guess would be a good word, and kind of being responsible with our treatments as well. So there's a lot to it, and I love to get really deep into it. But you know, there's a lot to it. Oh, okay, Joanne. So you said that the county treats for mosquitoes at night. My assumption, and I don't take this as gospel, my guess would be because there's less people and the way that they apply is a much broader and higher volume method than, you know, what we do normally as kind of like arborists and landscapers and landowners. You know, they're applying much more product in a much different way than even Mosquito Joe is. So that's probably why they do it at night. There's just less people around, not many people walking around. Good questions here. And then Gregory, do you have a draft letter that I could give to my neighbors to inform them in a nice way? No, I don't, but we can always talk about that later. We can chat. I'll give you my contact info and maybe we can work on something together. So let's get back into it here. Great questions, great comments. Like I said, keep them coming. This is really, you know, I like to keep these things as casual as possible, and that can be tricky to do in a webinar. So keep those comments coming. I love them. So let's jump into it. IPM, right? Integrated Pest Management. It is a sustainable science-based decision-making process that combines biological, cultural, physical, and chemical tools to identify, manage, and reduce risk from pests, right? In a nutshell, it's a bunch of different methods we can utilize to control problem bugs, problem insects. This uses pest management tools and strategies in a way that minimizes overall economic, health, and environmental risks. So, right, three really important things. So by utilizing these tools, and we're going to go into them here, not everything when it comes to pest control is spray, 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 right? In fact, that might be the most popular and most seen one, but there's a lot of things that we can do to our trees even as just homeowners, that can go a long way in either supplementing or in some cases even replacing some of our chemical management. And we're going to talk about that. So let's dive into these a little bit deeper. So as I said, there's these five facets of IPM. The first one being cultural, which is things like proper pruning practices here in the top left. We have mechanical, which is one of my favorite ones because it involves fire sometimes, right? So you can use, instead of spraying Roundup, you could use a flamethrower. I literally just got a torch from Amazon yesterday to control the weeds in my vegetable garden because I don't want to spray Roundup in it because I eat the food that comes from it. So I'm going to try. I can't wait to try it out. It's probably what I'm going to do tomorrow, honestly. So that's our mechanical methods of control. We have biological, which is this bottom right. This is an assassin bug or a wheel bug, right? And this is a good guy, right? Because it's going after some of our pests. This is a predator. So it's going to go after some of the things in our gardens and in our landscapes that are causing harm to our landscapes. So these are good guys. These are the ones we want to preserve. We want to preserve pollinators. We also want to preserve other biological controls like beneficial pathogens, predators, there's beneficial parasites, there's beneficial mites. There's all these really good guys that are out there that we want to make sure we're preserving. Then we have biological. So biological here, you can see I have these little grow lights on my seedlings here. Physical, also known as environmental, but this is altering things like light or humidity in order to help control pests, help control plant stress. So that's it. And then finally, we have our chemical means of control. And these are what, really what we're getting into today, right? What we're talking about the mostly. So to dive into these a little bit further, biological, like I said, this is using predators, competitors, pathogens, parasitoids, things that control harmful pests. These are the good guys. Primarily, these are used against insects and mites. For example, gypsy or spongy moth, as it's now referred to, they use a biopesticide, which is a naturally occurring fungus, and they're able to use that in order to control our spongy moth populations and also, once again, conserve some of our beneficials. But that would be considered a biological control because it is a naturally occurring fungus that attacks specifically our spongy moth. Fortunately for us, too, I think a similar strain of that is also effective against the spotted lanternfly. So fun facts there for us. Now you can use this by promoting promoting habitat for these in your garden. So using a diverse palette of plants in your garden, that plants that attract these beneficials, that attract these pollinators, that attract these good guys. You can also, believe it or not, buy these things online. You can go online, and I would encourage you, if you're going to do this, to make sure you do your homework and you're buying from a reputable dealer. I wouldn't just go on Amazon and order 500 ladybugs. I would make sure that you're doing your homework when it comes to buying these things, but you can go online and buy beneficial insects that you can then release in your landscape. It's really quite cool. It's like 2 days, you go online, you order this stuff, 2 days later, you have 1,000 ladybugs, or you have 10,000 beneficial mites, and you can go out and you can put them on your plants, and they are effective to a point. These are going to be really helpful in controlling lower populations of pests. If you have an infestation, they may not be your best course of action, but they can help when you have lower populations. They can help manage populations. They're really, it's quite cool. We also have cultural control. We're going to talk about cultural control a lot tonight because it's really, really important. But this is modifications of planting and maintenance activities that then reduces or prevents pest problems to begin with. This is things like proper landscape design, proper plant selection, putting the right plant in the right place, irrigation. And what I mean by that is managing your irrigation systems properly, making sure that they're running the correct amount of time at the correct time of day, things of that nature. Soil conditions, making sure your soil conditions are correct. So, doing soil samples and sending them into Rutgers lab, fertilizing properly, right? Don't just dump fertilizer on your plants without having any kind of guidance. And you get that guidance by doing soil tests. Once again, we're not going to get into that because we just don't have time, but that's really important, and we can talk about that later. And then plant growth regulators, which we're definitely not going to talk about tonight because we definitely don't have time for that, although it is a really cool one. Now, I bring all this up because some of you may have seen this before, and some of you may have not. But this is the Mannion disease spiral, and this is a concept that was originated back in 1991. And this is something that gets brought up a lot. If you're in the industry, you've probably seen this a million times, but there's a good reason for it. And because this is what when we look at this, we're seeing that we have all of these different factors at play, right? This is a spiral. So as we get closer to the middle of the spiral, we have all these different factors that are becoming more and more devastating. And I'm hoping you can see this okay. But there's one thing important here to notice. And that is that we do not have any biotic. We don't have any living issues until we get to almost the middle of this spiral, right? We're almost already to mortality, which is right here in the middle. So we have all of this that's taking place before we get to pests, before we get to diseases, before we get to these biotic, these living factors that ultimately wind up in serious plant decline or death. And so I say all this because it's really important that we do everything we can to manage these factors, these most of which are cultural, right? Urban environment, genetic potential, soil compaction, poor fertility, low soil moisture, or poor soil drainage, like all of these things, right? That we manage as many of these as possible, because a lot of times this can prevent pest outbreaks to begin with. Plants get stressed just like we do. Now, theirs is slightly different, right? They're not stressed about financials or who's going to win the baseball game tonight. They're stressed is significantly different. But all of these things, these predisposing and inciting factors, play a significant role in the amount of stress that trees have, right? Believe it or not, trees, as soon as you take a tree and put it in a nursery and plant it in your yard, even if it looks perfectly healthy and you did everything completely right, that plant is still under stress because it's not growing where it natively wants to grow, right? Trees normally are growing in woods, and they have these cycles that happen within those forested environments. And as soon as we take a tree out of its natural forested environment, it's going to be stressed. So right off the bat, we have stress. And all these other factors, which is why planting the right tree in the right place is so critical, just add up and add up and add up and add up until ultimately now this tree is much more susceptible to these pests that we're trying to avoid, right? Now, this is an updated model. And the reason I show this was done in 2022 by Sandra Denman, and they were looking at oak decline in this case. But this one I like because, first of all, it looks a little cooler. It's a little easier to read, and it incorporates the very important aspect of time. So this is the same spiral we're seeing, only a little more three-dimensional. But if you notice, the further down this spiral we get, the more of these factors that we're adding up and adding up, the longer our time to recovery is. And that is also critical because if we can do a few things early on and preventatively, then we can really not only avoid some things to begin with, but also keep that plant healthier and looking much better for longer. It's easier to do that, right? So that's really important. We talked about right tree, right place. These are kind of just going into the weeds a little bit more on that spiral, but I want to get into some other things that I'm running low on. Not running low on time here, but I do. We have a lot. We've got a lot to go through here. So that spiral is a really nice concept, and for a lot of things, you can plug them into it really nicely. But there are certain pests, especially, that don't fit into that spiral very well at all. Most of which are invasive or foreign pests, which are things like emerald ash borer. This is our friend, the emerald ash borer right here. This is what's killing our ash trees currently, or already has killed our ash trees. It's been in New Jersey now for quite a while, and it's pretty much ran through them. This is an invasive pest, meaning that it's not native to the United States. And that's a problem because these pests come in and they don't have any biological controls here, right? There is no predator here that knows that they want to go and attack this emerald ash borer, right? Because it's not from here. There's no reason for them to know that. There's no reason for them. They don't even have any idea what it is, right? And that is an issue because not only will a lot of these invasive pests attack our native trees, even without them being in stress, but it's also almost completely up to us as humans using chemical means of control, so using pesticide products to control these invasive pests, right? And there are a lot of them. Japanese beetles is one. Spotted lanternfly is one that's probably, that's the most dramatic one we've seen in the last couple of years. This emerald ash borer, spongy moth. These are all examples of devastating invasive pests that we deal with. And most of these pests are actually going to attack healthy trees. They want the healthier trees because they are better food sources. And so these pests don't fit into that decline model at all. And it's really important to keep that in mind because there are some pests still that we have to, as humans, intervene and control. And most of those controls are done by chemical means of pesticide products, insecticides. A lot of those insecticides being neonics. I'm wrapping it all up here. We're coming full circle, right? Now, for the pests that we do deal with, because there still are a lot of native pests that have been here since before we showed up, even that reducing stress on plants does help to manage. And so we can do that with a few things. And these are really nice because not only do these help prevent pests, but these are also going to give you healthier plants in general. And these are not just for trees, but these are for all plants across the board. And the first one is simple, but proper watering. Believe it or not, the way you water a plant, there's right and wrong ways, right? And so overhead watering is usually frowned upon, not so much because of insects, but because of fungal issues that it can promote. Those fungal issues, however, do lead to increased plant stress, obviously, right? Because now they're dealing with a disease. And so proper watering, and what I mean by proper watering is making sure that we're doing the right frequency of watering, that we're doing the right depth and duration, and we're using the right type of water. We're not going to get into the type of water because most of the water that we have is just fine, right? Just turn the hose on and use it. I don't know if there's any regulations on rainwater and all that in New Jersey, to be honest with you, but that's kind of what that gets into. But for trees, right? For trees, we want a deep root watering, meaning if we just kind of put the sprinkler on it for a half hour, take it off, we haven't done anything for that tree. Yeah, maybe the grass will be a little greener underneath it. But remember that tree roots are within the top 12 inches of soil. So if we're only watering the top inch or two of soil every time we go out and water, it's not really doing anything for our plant, for our trees. In fact, it can actually stress them out even further. So making sure that we're getting a deep and thorough watering every time is critical to preserving the health of our trees. And I'm going to speak to trees specifically here because that's my wheelhouse there. And so there's a couple ways we can do that, right? We have these drip systems, which are by far my favorite because they're a constant, slow watering that gives the soil time to absorb that moisture. You can get nice and deep in there. You're not just, you don't usually wind up with giant puddles. And so it's a really nice way to water your trees. You can also use things like gator bags or these, I think this is the tree diaper actually right there in that middle picture. And then they also have probes that you can insert. This is a deep root watering probe. Well, you'll actually push the probe into the ground, and it hydraulically, with hydraulic pressure, pushes water right into that root zone that we're targeting. So there's some really cool ways to do it. By far, drip irrigation is the most common, the easiest to incorporate into your landscape, and one of the best things you can do, like I said. The other thing is mulch. A really good friend of mine, Dr. Neil Hendrickson, has a great talk. In fact, I think he did it last year, called Turf Wars. And turf is one of the worst things that you can have underneath of a tree. And unfortunately, it's something that most people, they take a lot of pride in their front lawn, but they also take a lot of pride in their trees. And so it can be kind of a battle sometimes. But mulching and proper mulching can do wonders for your tree. It's one of the best things you can do for a tree, in my humble opinion. And you're going to see why here in a minute. But I'm going to skip ahead actually here. This is why I like mulching. So this is the effects of wood chip mulch in relation to root growth. And so what you can see here is that on the left, where my laser pointer is now, this is the density of roots that we were seeing when grown underneath turf. Now, when you remove that turf and you mulch, now this is what we're seeing, right? So you can see right off the bat, I'm a visual guy. I like pictures. They tell 1,000 words. This is critical. This is why mulch is so important. And you can see here in the data, I love data too, that with mulch, our moisture content goes up almost double. Our root density doubles. Our mycorrhizal tips, which are beneficial fungi found within the soil that is responsible for helping roots take up water and nutrients. You can see that they doubled, and our soil pH is more neutral as well. So you can see all the benefits that mulch had here, in addition to growth. So if growth is something you're looking at doing, yeah, fertilizer is fantastic, but mulch is also really good. I'm not going to say better, but it's also really good. So you can see here, my bars here with the hash marks in them are our mulched plant, and the solid bars are not mulched plant. Now arborvitaes, forget about arborvitaes, right? They're just being difficult. But when we move on to things like yews, our taxus, our hydrangeas, our cranberry bush, you can see that in some cases we doubled, almost tripled the amount of above ground growth when mulched versus unmulched. Now that's really cool, right? Because we didn't have to just pump a whole bunch of fertilizer into the ground. All we simply did there was mulch. That's pretty amazing, right? So mulch is super important and something I would encourage you highly to use, especially under any kind of special trees that you have. We'll talk briefly about some soil remediation because soil is something that sometimes people forget about, but you got to realize that sometimes up to half of a tree's mass is underground in the soil, right? The roots. Without roots, we got nothing, right? We've got a stick coming out of the ground. So roots are critical to the health of a tree. And in order to have healthy roots, we have to have healthy soil. And so once again, watering trees properly, in addition to having soil that has the correct amount of organic matter, that has the right pH level, that has the right density, meaning it's not compact. Soil is a critical component to tree health that a lot of times, unfortunately, gets overlooked. So Clark mentioned here that mulch can also have its issues by harboring mice and voles that will nibble bark and roots, and the mulch gives critters camouflage from predators such as hawks. That's a good point there. And so one of the ways that you mulch, in fact, let me see, I don't think there's a picture here, but one of the important things when it comes to mulch is, as everything, properly applying it. And I don't have a picture. Now, one of the ways we want it when we apply mulch, has anybody ever seen the mulch volcanoes that you sometimes see? A lot of times you see them at shopping centers. It's an unfortunate thing that happens quite often. That, without doubt, Clark, is going to negatively impact your tree. Not all mulch is good mulch. We want to get about 2 to 4 inches is kind of our sweet spot as far as depth. But when we get to the base of the tree, we have what's called a root flare. I could have sworn, oh, maybe I got a picture here. So our root flare, it's hard to see, but this is our root flare here. Now, when we get to the root flare of a tree, that's where we don't want mulch. And so what you can do is you can have 2 to 4 inches of mulch, you can have a layer, and then as you get to your root flare, you can kind of taper it off so that by the time we have our root flare, that root flare is still nice and exposed. We always want that root flare exposed. So we can still put that mulch down and help to mitigate some of those harmful effects that Clark was talking about in the comments. But unfortunately, there's no perfect thing we can do. There's always going to be downsides to everything. But definitely, I would say, doing that, keeping our root flares exposed, so properly applying mulch. If you do some research online, there's some really great extension publications that you can find out there that kind of get into the weeds more of how to properly mulch. And I would highly encourage you to read those. It takes you 5-10 minutes, but it can teach you an awful lot. And then Lauren asked, she said, I have a slightly sloped yard and my mulch washes away. What can I do? Oh man. Well, a couple things. I think the easiest thing is kind of edging out before you mulch. So kind of taking like a big spade or a spade shovel and you kind of create almost, you kind of digging in a little bit and kind of making a lip that will help hold the mulch. There's some things you can do. Also, I've seen people where they'll actually kind of build maybe a 6 to 8 inch wall around, like, they'll make a tree ring out of stone, which could help. That might be tricky on a sloped yard, but there are some things you can do. But that does sometimes create pose quite the challenge for sure. So yeah, great comments there. So a couple other things too, and that we can do is we can use things like air tools. So there's a tool called the air spade out there, which is basically a gigantic pneumatic air gun. So it just shoots high pressure air into the soil, which is really nice because as opposed to using traditional digging tools that sever roots and damage roots, the air, while it does have some effects on the roots that are negative, most of it is positive in that it's relieving soil compaction. We're able to kind of incorporate things like organic matter or soil amendments in there. So it's a really cool and exciting tool to be able to use to help preserve the soil underneath of our trees. Some other things here too. Oh, there we go. Is fertilizer blends. I kind of talked about fertilizer in a negative light so far, but fertilizer is a good thing. I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing. However, I do like to promote the use of targeted fertilizers, meaning you're taking soil samples or having soil samples taken that give you results as to what you already have in your soil. A lot of times you have everything you need, but maybe you have a pH level that's out of whack. And so with an out of whack pH level, which means your soil is either too acidic or too alkaline, you can have the nutrients there in the soil. However, because of that out of whack pH level, they're not available to the soil, right? And so there are sometimes things where you can keep putting that calcium down, but maybe the soil's already got all that calcium. It's just that pH level needs to be adjusted. But some really good things you can do too, and mulch will actually really help out your soil, right? It's going to help regulate the amount of moisture loss for sure is one thing it will do. But also things like organic matter. And the most popularly used version of organic matter is manure, right? And fortunately for us, if we don't have a cow, we can go to the Home Depot or a big box store and get something like this, which we can incorporate into our soils. Organic matter plays a critical role in soil health. There's also things we can get like mycorrhizal inoculants, pH adjusters, which is usually some of you may have used lime on your lawns before. What you're doing there is adjusting the pH, right? So lime will adjust that pH in the same way that sulfur will adjust that pH. They're just doing different things. They're adjusting it up or down. And then you can get regional blends of fertilizer. And fortunately for us, especially you go out and you get something like a Scott's blend, these are regional blends. So if you go to the hardware store in Nebraska and get a regular old fertilizer, it's going to be different than what we find here in New Jersey, right? Because we have different soil types. And so a lot of these fertilizer manufacturers have done some of the work for us by figuring out the soils in different parts of the United States and then only selling the blends that complement those soils in those areas. I'm hoping that made sense. So these are like what we call regional fertilizer blends. And I see some questions here. Gregory asked, how often do you recommend aerating? For trees, I always recommend when you have soil that's compact, and there's ways to measure compaction, but generally, if you're watering underneath that tree and that water is just running off, or if you tend to see puddles forming underneath that tree during rain events, that's usually a sign that you might have compact soil. If you have construction where you have equipment running over the root zone of the tree, or you've been mowing your lawn with your tractor and you use the same, you do a lot of circles around the tree all the time. If you have a high traffic area, all these things are clues that aerating or decompacting that soil, it might be time to do that. Sometimes you can even see it reflected in the ground, but so the answer to that is, it could be once every couple of years if you're on like a high traffic area, like a park or a university. We used to do work down at University of Delaware where we would be down there doing airspace work on those trees every 2 or 3 years because they had a lot of construction and lots of foot traffic. Or it could be, once ever. So it depends. And then Barbara asked about using shredded leaves as mulch. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, that's a great way to kind of recycle those leaves into something beneficial. Instead of putting them on the curb, throw them underneath your tree. And once again, do it in a responsible way, right? Don't just throw them all in there in a giant pile. I wouldn't do any more than 2 or 4 inches if you're going to do that. But if you can incorporate them in with an air tool, that's even better. Great questions there. So with that, let's talk about some of the alternative products. And I'm going to blaze through this and leave some time for questions because this is, and like I said, I apologize. I had my disclaimer early on, but we're going to get into some really, this is where the $5 words come out for sure. But there's some important information here that I think is applicable to just in general that we should know. So let's talk about labels first. So as I said, label is the law. We have to read the labels on any products that we're looking to apply anywhere, basically. And what you'll see on just about every label is a signal word. And a signal word is basically an indication of the risk of that product. And so sometimes we have products that have no signal words. Sometimes we have products that'll be in the caution, warning, danger, and then danger, poison. And as you can see, as you get up that chart there, they become scarier and scarier, right? Danger, poison, usually accompanied by a skull and crossbones. Bad news. Now, fortunately for us, most of these products have become antiquated and are no longer used, and they've been replaced by more less reduced risk products, right? And that's just one of the benefits of technology is we're able to get either the same effectiveness or better effectiveness from less risky products. That's wonderful. That's a great thing. And so what's important though is that you're paying attention to these and understanding that these signal words usually correlate to what our minimum PPE requirements are. And PPE is our personal protective equipment. This is things like gloves and eye protection and long sleeves and long pants, closed-toed shoes. Please never ever spray anything with flip-flops on. This is really important to pay attention to and understand because it could be the difference between us buying that product and not buying that product, right? Maybe we don't want that risky product sitting on the shelf in our garage, or maybe we don't want it used on our property. Or maybe we know that we need to use it, but we want to make sure that we're paying attention and using it responsibly and protecting ourselves, right? So signal words are really, really important. Sorry, this slide, I must have gotten mixed up in here. So what are the other systemically applied actives that are available for ornamental trees on residences? Now, keep in mind, a lot of these you're not going to find in big box stores. These are mostly geared towards professional applicators or certified private applicators. So if any of you have your private pesticide applicators license in New Jersey, you may be familiar with some of these. But we're going to talk about a couple of them. We're going to blaze through them. And I'm going to hit on kind of some of the highlights here because we're coming up just in the sake of time. Now, fortunately for us, these two products, oxydimentin methyl and dicrotophos, these are now, for the most part, you can't even get them for our uses. And that is because they were one of those danger poison labels. These were really, really, really scary products in a nutshell. These were really popular. I mean, they worked great on pests. There's no doubt about that. They worked great on pests, but the person applying them was, was at risk. I mean, these products literally on the label, it says can be fatal right there. Fatal if swallowed, fatal if absorbed through the skin, and may be fatal if inhaled. Scary things, right? And so these products, for the most part, have been antiquated. And so we don't even have to really talk about them much. Now, hold on, bear with me. Now, acephate is a product. So acephate, if you remember earlier on, I talked about organophosphates and how neonics all but replace them. Now, acephate is one of those organophosphates. However, it is one of our reduced risk organophosphates. That's a good thing, okay, because this is one of our main alternatives to the neonics that we're losing the use of. And you can see that it's because it has a really wide range of effectiveness on a number of different pests, including mites, right? So acephate is an active ingredient that will be still available for use that we can use to kind of replace some of our neonics. Now, it's important to understand that this being an organophosphate is still, as far as a human health thing, it is going to be a little riskier use for us for us to use as opposed to our neonic products. However, this is still only a caution label. Depending on the product you get, most of them will be a caution label. And I don't want to scare you either, but I do want to once again point out that that caution label means that for this product, we must wear long sleeve shirt, long pants, socks and shoes, chemical resistant gloves, and protective eyewear. Chemical resistant gloves means that we're not using regular garden gloves, cotton and leather, things of that can absorb these products and actually hold them against our skin. So these chemical resistant gloves would be things like the nitrile or rubber gloves that are not going to absorb whatever we're spraying. So that's really important. And when we do and wear these things and apply via the label, once again, usually our risk is going to be low. And that's a beautiful thing because we're using what we have to because we read the label. Remember, it's always about the label. So some of the big ones, some of you may be familiar with bagworms. It can be really effective against bagworms, willow oaks. Like I said, there's a large host range. I'm going to just keep on trucking if that's okay, because we're really getting into the weeds here, and I do apologize for that. But there's no way around some of these big $5 words and technical things. Another one of our alternatives is ivermectin. Ivermectin, once again, is both a insecticide and a miticide. It is systemic. We apply this via a root flare injection. So this is kind of cool because this is when we're actually taking our product and delivering it directly into the vascular system of the tree. If you think of a tree like a giant pump, what we're doing is we're taking this product and we're putting it right into the pump, right? And so it's going to go right into the tree and taken up right up through the crown that way. So really kind of cool. Once again, technology is a beautiful thing because it's really advanced to all these different delivery methods that we can use. Quite interesting. I'm going to jump ahead here. I'm not going to go through all these because I don't want to put all you to sleep. Now, ivermectin benzoate, this is a good one to talk about because this one, it was brought up earlier, emerald ash borer and ash trees. This is the key tool that we're using in the industry, especially as professionals, to combat the spread of emerald ash borer. Once again, this is not a neonic, so this is one of our alternatives. And that's great because once again, this is delivered via a root flare injection. So this gets delivered directly into the tree, reducing or eliminating exposure to the environment, right? There's no risk of drift or anything like that. And it works really, really well. This product lasts for 2 years. So that's another benefit because it means we're applying it less often. We're also applying this in terms of milliliters, meaning a teeny tiny bit of product is going into that tree and controlling a pest for up to 2 years. I mean, that's incredible, absolutely incredible. And so that's why some of these tools are just super powerful. Now, ivermectin benzoate is critical to our fight in emerald ash borer, but we can also use it for other things too. So we can use it for things like winter moth, which is more of a New England issue. Japanese beetle. Now with Japanese beetle, we're only going to get about a year of control because they're feeding in the leaves. But it will also work against Japanese beetle. And this is, once again, we're really getting into the weeds here, but there are higher concentrations of ivermectin benzoate available. So once again, depending on what product you buy that contains this active ingredient, you could have a warning signal word or a caution signal word. So once again, always reading that label is critical. Azadirachtin, it's another one. It's very similar to ivermectin benzoate, except that this is a neem-based, what they call a bioinsecticide. And so, unfortunately, not as effective as ivermectin benzoate. However, this is another alternative that is available. And then chlorintraniliprole. Now, this is one, the trade name for it is acelloprin. But this is an interesting one because this one does not have a signal word. That's how reduced risk it is, that it was considered such a low risk that the EPA did not even assign a signal word to it. Now that to me is pretty dang cool. This is a newer product. It's a very expensive product. However, it is available. And I have this in the systemic section of this because there have been studies that show that this does work systemically. And the way you would do that is you would apply it to the soil at the base of a plant and it would be taken up. However, this only works for certain pests on certain plants. For the most part, this product will be applied via a foliar spray. Now, we also have foliar sprayed alternatives. And unfortunately for us, we're going to have to rely a lot heavier on foliar applied insecticides because with the loss of our neonics, there's just not a lot of alternatives out there. And so you will see, as a result of this, an increase in spray applications. It's just that's what's going to have to happen. And so some of these, though, we can still use. So once again, you can see chlorantraniliprole on here, which is a celiprin, as well as bifenazate, which we're not going to talk about because that is a miticide. But there's pyroproxyfen on there. And now pyroproxyfen is a really, really interesting one because this is what we call an insect growth regulator. Now, the way pyroproxyfen works is, in order to understand it, I have to explain a little bit about insects and life cycles of insects. So all insects have a life cycle where they're going from either the egg stage onto adult stage. Now, some of them do this with complete metamorphosis and incomplete metamorphosis. And if you think back to like 6th grade science, you'll remember what those two are. But that's not also really that important when it comes to insect growth regulators. What is important to know is that as these insects grow, they produce less of this juvenile hormone, right? Makes sense, right? As they grow towards adulthood, there's less of these juvenile hormones that are naturally occurring within the insect. Makes sense. So what we're doing by applying pyroproxyfen, the trade name for it is Proxite, one of them, is we are spraying onto them a juvenile hormone mimic, right? And what this does is this can be very effective against almost all life stages of an insect. However, it's going to be most effective when it's applied to an insect, especially a pest, that is in its juvenile form still. In other words, it hasn't quite gotten to its adult stage. And so what we have here is egg and adult, and we're applying it to this middle stage, right? To the nymphal stage, or something, that the crawler stage sometimes is referred to. And by doing that, we're preventing them from molting, which means they never get to adulthood. If they never get to adulthood, well, they can't feed, right? If they can't feed, they're not going to survive. So once again, really kind of morbid stuff we're talking about here. This is also very impactful to adults as well. And when sprayed on a female insect, basically sterilizes her so that she is unable to reproduce. This also works as an ovicide, which means that when applied to eggs, it reduces the viability of the exposed eggs. And so once again, it's a really powerful tool. And this is once again considered a reduced risk to pollinators and beneficials because we're not really killing anything with this. And so when it's applied to an adult bee, it's not as impactful to them, right? So it can be beneficial in that aspect too. So this is a really powerful tool that we have at our disposal to use, and one of my favorite alternatives to neonics. And this is one that I think we're going to see, especially in New Jersey, a lot of increased use in it because of those aspects of it. So something interesting there, and it's really effective against some of our really impactful pests like scales. This is our primary, one of our primary tools in the management of scale insects here. So just some data there. If you're interested in any of this data, let me know. I can send it to you. I'm more than happy to share it. But just for the sake of everybody trying to keep some people awake, I'm not going to go through it, get into it too deep. To wrap up with pyroproxyfen here, our insect growth regulator, Generally, these products are going to carry a caution signal word. So on the lower end of our risk, our signal word spectrum there. However, you do need protective headgear for wearing, for applying this. It's kind of one of those oddball things that you see every once in a while. But once again, the only reason we know that is because we read that label. So once again, I'm going to beat that into us tonight because that's so important. So let's wrap up with that. And then we have chlorantraniliprole. We kind of talked about that already. This is a really powerful tool, though, against our friends, not our friends, our enemies, the spongy moth, right? So this is applied as a foliar spray. But once again, remember, this one did not even have a signal word. So this is a really safe product that is really effective against spongy moth. And it's quite selective in its mode of action, meaning that it does really good job at controlling some pests, while other pests and other insects, it doesn't do anything to them at all. And so once again, this is one of those active ingredient products that is really considered quite a reduced risk to pollinators. And so that is a great thing. And it works really well on chewing insects, which is why we get really good control of spongy moth. It works great on Japanese beetles. It works great on things like bagworms. And basically what it's doing is it's paralyzing the jaw muscles, which is why it works. And so we get really great control of those while also having a reduced risk to pollinators. So it's a wonderful thing. And the moment we've all been waiting for, the wrap up. We're going to wrap all of this up. It's just like a roller coaster. We've gone through an awful lot, and I can only hope that most of you are still with me here. But let's wrap it up. So these are this is our toolbox as it stands right now, right? For piercing and sucking insects, which are things like scales, and a spotted lanternfly is one of these examples. Now, these are the products that we're losing, right? So we will no longer, went too far, sorry. We will no longer, oh man. See, I try to get creative with these animations, and then sometimes backfire. So we're losing 3 of our main ones, but we still do have on the table. If you're going to take a picture or screenshot anything, these are the slides to do that on, because this is really going to be, these are great take-home slides for you. So we do still have things like hort oil, which we did not talk about tonight, but is another really great tool in our toolbox. For piercing and sucking insects, this is what we've got left. For our spray treatments, we are losing, once again, imidacloprid, dinotefuran, and acetamiprid. But we do still have, once again, hort oil, pyroproxyfen, that peroxide. These are great, great, great. In addition to things like insecticidal soap, which is another powerful tool and will still be available. For tree injection, we're losing these 3, but we still do have acephate, as well as emamectin benzoate there on the bottom. You can see we have that as well. So these are, like I said, this is another one of those slides that I would kind of highlight and encourage you to take a picture of if you want to, or reach out to me and I can send them to you, whatever is easier. And then finally, for our soil applied products, we're losing all of them except for our friend acephate. That will be really the only soil applied product that we have left. With the one exception of chlorantraniliprole in very select situations. All right. So to wrap all this up and kind of, bring it on home, neonicotinoids, they are a valuable tool in managing insect pests. There's no doubt about that, especially when they're used correctly and responsibly. However, by using a complete IPM approach, utilizing not just chemical aspects of control, but also these cultural and biological and mechanical means, we're able to still manage these pest populations. And no, it won't be as easy as it was, but we can still do it. And I think it's important that I think one of the benefits, one of the takeaways from this is that it's going to kind of renew our focus on this. And I think that's a good thing. We do have alternative pesticide products available. We did go through them very quickly. And I do want to take this time, too, to make sure I mention, I'm always available. I'm going to show you this next slide is going to be my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions at any time. Reach out, email, phone, text, smoke signals, whatever. I don't care. But I'm always available to answer questions. I'm more than happy to help you however I can. I can't promise I have all the answers, but I try to I at least know somebody smarter than me that does, so I can help you out. And so with that, I'm going to just go ahead and put it up there. So once again, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat with y'all, answer questions. Like I said, I'm right here in New Jersey, so I'm a local now, and I'm very happy to chat with you. So I'm going to go through here and see if there's any other questions that popped in.
Yeah, there's a couple in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Clark and I were talking about football and apparently the presidential address, darn, that started a few minutes ago. So, but there's some in the Q&A. You see, Tom was asking about biochar. Back when we were talking about mulch and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, biochar is one of those great tools that we can incorporate in the soil. What biochar does is it acts as it helps kind of retain nutrients and organic matter a little bit better. One thing with biochar that you want to be careful of, though, is that you don't put too much down. Generally, you don't want any more than like 3 to 5% of your soil as biochar. And once again, where you source your biochar is also important. So if that's something you're going to use, highly encourage it. I think it's a fantastic tool to help out with our soils. But once again, making sure you're doing your homework on where you're getting it and make sure you understand what you're getting and then how much to put down and all that kind of fun stuff. Great question. I also see here, I'll jump in. I see Susan, you asked a great question, and I think this is an important one to address. And I once again, I'm going to give you a high level answer here because every product is going to last differently. And so let me read the question first so we're all on the same page. But Susan asked, how long does a systemic last in the environment when leaves fall off and disperse onto the land and the drainage systems, et cetera? That's called bioaccumulation, right? Is when a product can accumulate within an environment. Now, fortunately, most of the products that we talked about today, that's not really a concern, especially our systemic ones, because once again, with our systemic products, we are already putting a really small amount of product into the tree to begin with. And so, like I said, we're usually talking in terms of milliliters or ounces. But the same can also be said for foliar applications. Once again, when we're doing these foliar applied products, we may be spraying 20 gallons of solution onto a tree, but only a small percentage of that is actually active ingredient. A lot of these persistent active ingredients that we do use, especially the soil applied ones, also break down very, very quickly by UV light and other factors within the environment. And so when we do have off-target applications, meaning we have product that maybe bubbled up out of the soil and was on the surface, sunlight breaks it down, depending on the product, usually very quickly, sometimes within hours. In addition to, when these active ingredients and products get into the tree, there are metabolites and things that are breaking them down within the tree. And sometimes it's those metabolites that are actually what's doing the work. And I'm getting into the weeds here. I apologize because I'm really going down a rabbit hole. But to answer your question, in a nutshell, in most cases, that's not a concern we have because we're just not applying enough product for that to be a concern. Sometimes we get the question about pests that are killed by products we use that are then fed on by things like predators or birds. Once again, generally what we find is that most of the time these predators they're hunters, right? They're not scavengers. So if they're already dead, they're usually not even going to bother with them. In addition to, once again, it's such a small, low dose that it's usually not a concern. But that's a great question and something that was really, really good to bring up. So thank you for that. I think that was Is there anything else you saw, Lori, that was
No, I think you covered it all. I know Ed had a question at the end of Q&A that we were focusing obviously on trees and plants. He was asking about IPM for flea infestations on cats and in homes. It's kind of outside our realm, right? A little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'm not in.
yeah, Ed, I apologize. That I'm not even going to attempt to answer that one because that is so far outside of my wheelhouse. But you know, I see where it came from because you're still using, it's amazing the overlap. For example, I give my dog imidacloprid for fleas and ticks, which is one of the products that we talked about tonight. So as far as the active ingredients, there is a lot of overlap in what we use in ornamental horticulture, for trees and plants, and what we use inside homes and what we use, for structural pest control. So, but that I don't know. So,
Yeah, it's outside our
unfortunately.
wheelhouse for sure. Yeah. But like you were saying
Yeah,
earlier on, Mark, like, these products are still going to be allowed for agricultural use, right? They're,
right.
they're heavily used in agriculture. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just this one niche or whatever. So, but this was great. This, I've obviously you and I and the industry have been talking about Neonics for many years now. I learned a lot tonight. So I really, really appreciate it. You were just a wealth of information. So thank you again.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't see any other questions. So I think we can probably wrap it up. Mary and George did ask management of ash borer disease. So I'm assuming that's EAB. You kind of touched on that, right? With
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tools in the toolbox. So
yeah.
this presentation was recorded, is being recorded. So I will pop it up on YouTube. So those of you that either had to leave early or if you still have questions, you want to go back and look, it'll be there on YouTube so you can go through it. And man, Mark, thank you so much for posting your contact information. I know he will answer your question or he will respond to you because he's amazing. So if you do have any other questions or anything that you think about, reach out to him. He's a great resource for all of us. So thank you for that. And I think we're good for the night, right? I think we can look at
Yeah.
this 8:29. Great
Oh,
job.
look at that. Perfect.
Look at
Yeah,
that.
once again, thanks for the invite. It was a lot of fun. And
Good.
yeah, looking forward to the next time.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I hope everybody has a good evening and we will see you next month. Take care, everybody. Thanks. Thanks, Mark.
See ya.
Bye.